Off the Democratic National Convention, Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker is here in Ohio, in Cincinnati, in fact, and she's going to be talking with vice presidential nominee and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance in an interview you'll see only here on WLWT this weekend on Meet the Press. I sat down with her this afternoon to talk about the state of the presidential race now. You know, look, first of all, you have to be exhausted. It's been a busy week for you, a busy couple of weeks. What are your takeaways now that the DNC is over, the RNC is over? What are your takeaways from both conventions?
Cherie, first of all, my one big takeaway is how much has changed in this race in the course of a month. A month ago, President Biden was at the top of the ticket, trailing former President Trump nationally in key battleground states. When he passed the baton to Vice President Kamala Harris, that has now changed. She's now leading nationally and tied or leading in a number of key battleground states, all within the margin of error. So if you talk to folks, they say this race is tied. But the Democratic National Convention was something that no one could have imagined just a month ago because of the energy, because of the enthusiasm, because of the excitement around Vice President Kamala Harris. They were expecting to be kind of depressed heading into a convention with President Biden. Instead, it was the opposite. I think the big unknown and the big question mark is, will Vice President Kamala Harris build on the momentum that she had coming into the convention? Democrats feel like she delivered a strong speech, really reintroduced herself to Americans, but will her poll numbers start to go up coming out of this?
As we're talking and we're monitoring the news conference right now, RFK, not necessarily dropping out of the race. He says he's going to leave his name on the ballot in states where it's definitively red, definitively blue, but that he's going to take his name off the ballot in battleground states. And it appears as if he's going to be then supporting former President Trump. What kind of impact do you think that could have on this race?
It's going to be fascinating to see what the impact is of RFK Jr. endorsing former President Trump. His poll numbers dropped when Vice President Harris assumed her role at the top of the ticket. He's now polling around 5%. What happens to his voters? Will they all automatically go to Trump? Not necessarily at all. And remember, he's got some controversial positions. For example, he questions vaccines. And so Trump's been asked about that already. Will he continue to have to answer questions about some of those more controversial policies? But look, I would say that both candidates are probably going to be making a play for every voter and that 5% slice of voters, because in a close election, every vote matters.
This weekend on Meet the Press, you're going to be interviewing Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance. What can we expect from that interview?
So I'm really looking forward to sitting down with Senator Vance here in Cincinnati. We are going to talk about a range of issues. I'll get his reaction to everything that we just heard at the Democratic National Convention. And I'm going to talk to him about some of the policy proposals that we're hearing from him and former President Trump, whether it's immigration or the economy or, of course, reproductive rights. All of them are issues that really matter to voters, and there's a lot to delve into. So we'll be talking about a wide range of topics with Senator Vance.
And lastly, look, 70 plus days to go.
Yeah.
What do you expect here leading up? What can voters expect here in the next couple of weeks and months?
It's already been an unprecedented election cycle when you think about it. The assassination attempt against former President Trump, President Biden passing the torch in the summer before the election. It's something that the American public has never seen before. So will there be more of these extraordinary, unprecedented moments? We'll have to see. I think what makes this race unique is that it's such a condensed timeline. Which candidate will that benefit? Which candidate will that hurt? We'll have to wait until November to find out.
Well, we appreciate you taking a few moments with us, and always appreciate your insight.
It's wonderful to be with you.
Really is such a insightful but also really good journalist there. So you can watch the J.D. Vance interview this Sunday at 10 o'clock on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker. It's right after WLWT News 5 today.